king, first Saul and then David. So this is like the transition phase between the time of judges and the time of the kings. And so this is, I guess, kind of the lowest point, I would say, of the time of the judges, because it looks at the priesthood and just how corrupt it can get, because you have Eli here and his sons, and they corrupt the priesthood, and we see that in the story here. But we see God working in the working his hand is so that he brings Samuel into the picture, so that he can take that and so that he brings Samuel in there and can work his ways through that, have his hand working in that way. So we'll get into that. So first off, we have the introduction of a man, and his name Elkanah. Anybody know what that name means? I'm fascinated. I'm kind of fascinated with all these names. So I research all these names. What does anybody know what Elkanah means? Yeah. Okay. So God has acquired, or one way of putting it is he's possessed, the possessed of God. Okay. He's always in. Whenever you see El, it means God. So, and then what follows is the name God something, possessed of God, or God acquired, something of that nature. Okay. So then the main kind of character in the beginning here, Hannah. So what's the word? The name Hannah. What's that meaning of her name? Anybody know? Yes. Her name means grace. Hannah means grace. And her adversary, Peninnah, what's her name? What's the meaning of her name? You know what her name, the meaning of her name? Fine. There's kind of like, people have, they say there's several ways you could say her name means. It's coral, pearl, or jewel for her name. Okay? And then, so the name Samuel. Why did she name him Samuel, and what's it mean? Why did she name her son Samuel? And what does that name? What's the meaning behind that name? Yeah, because she requested him of God, so it means asked of God or requested of God. Okay, and so and then the other characters in the story, and then, this name is really fascinating. The name Eli. What's the name Eli? This is a very fascinating name here, Eli. You know what that means? Very fascinating name. It's used a lot. Name's used a lot. Eli, what's that? Who said that? Yes. God is high. High. Okay. Where else do you see this name, Eli, in the Bible? Anybody know? It's a famous quote by a famous person. Yes, it's quoted by Jesus. Eli, Eli. So it can also mean what? My God. Yes. Can also be translated my God. My God, my God. So it's a very famous name and famous quote by Jesus. Very good. Okay. And Eli's sons. Now, this is something I didn't know when I researched it. Okay, so Hophni, what's that? Anybody know what that is? What that name is? Hophni. That's kind of a strange name. You know why it's a strange name? It says that Hophni and Phineas are Old Egyptian, from Old Egyptian names. Hophni meaning tadpole, or that's the root of it. But then the meaning of it is pugilist or fighter. Okay? And Phineas, now that's a famous name, isn't it? Phineas, where do you get that? How do we remember that name from what? Aaron's son, but this is not Aaron's son. This is Eli's son. Aaron's son's famous for what? He did a very courageous thing. He defended the honor of God by killing the Midianite woman and the man who brought her into the Israelite camp. So he was a very famous, courageous man. But this Phineas is not. This is Eli's son. But what does the name Phineas mean? Anybody know? Phineas means mouth of brass or bold speaker. Okay? Bold person. Okay? So Phineas is a bold speaking person. Okay? Okay, so that's what the names are. Okay, back to the story. So, who was this Elkanah man? What do we know about him? What's it say about Elkanah? He's who? Okay, but that really doesn't, it's not really about his lineage. Ephraimite means it's where he lives. His lineage was, get the right pointer. His lineage is in 1 Chronicles 6 and verse 22. And if you turn there, it tells you the lineage of Elkanah, first, and Samuel as well. 1 Chronicles 6. 1 Chronicles 6, verse 22. Yes. So that makes him a what? Levite. That's extremely important. It says that the sons of Kohath, and it goes on, and it says Elkanah. And then over in verse 33, it says these are the ones who served, and then it lists Samuel, that he was in the lineage of the Levites. Okay? So Elkanah and Samuel are what? Levites. They are Levites. Okay? That's very important to know. Okay, so when it says that he was an Ephraimite, it's really saying where he lived. What's really important is that he is a Levite. Okay? So, it's telling us about Elkanah, and that he had 2 wives, and then it addresses the immediate problem. So it's giving us the context of what's going on here, that he has one wife who has children, and the other wife Hannah, who does not have children, and it tells us why she does not have children. Why is it that she has no children? And why is it she's barren? Yes, very important to know why. Because God had not enabled her to have children. God says no children. God had closed her womb. Okay, so very important to know that. Okay, so, and now it tells us that they'd gone up to sacrifice. And why was Hannah distressed? Hannah was distressed. She was upset. Why was she upset? And she was tormented by the one who had children, the other wife. Okay? Peninnah was tormenting her and saying, you are no good because you don't have any children and I have a lot of children. So she was tormented by the other wife. Okay? And this is something we really can't comprehend because in the Israelite culture, it was absolutely horrible, something we can't understand for a woman to be barren and not have children. It was like she was cursed by God, okay, if she did not have children. So it was something that was, for her, was unbearable. Right. Yeah. So she had a horrible situation here. So what did Hannah do because of her terrible situation? What did she do? Feast of Tabernacles, that's correct. So she went to the tabernacle, and I think that's very interesting. I think it was a custom that there was a place for everyone to go near the tabernacle, as pictured here, and especially they allowed women to come to this place and pray. I think that's wonderful. Everyone was allowed to come, even women, as pictured here. And who's this guy? Eli. Here's the high priest there sitting by the tabernacle. Okay? So, there's Hannah. And what was Hannah doing? What was she praying? What did she pray? Right. Right. So here she is. Hannah rose up, it says, after, here it is at Shiloh where the tabernacle is. And here's Eli the priest sitting by the doorpost of the temple of the Lord, meaning the tabernacle. Here's Hannah, greatly distressed, praying to the Lord, weeping bitterly. She made a vow. O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me and not forget your maidservant, I will give your maidservant a son. Then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and a razor shall never come on his head. Meaning, there's a special thing it's called the son that she will give to the Lord will be a Nazarite from his birth. It's a special vow of the Nazarite. Okay? So, here's Eli looking at her praying. So what's Eli think when he sees this? Cindy? Yeah, because she's not speaking, she's just weeping and praying to herself. He sees her lips moving, but nothing's coming out, so he thinks, this woman's drunk. Okay, so he says what to her? He says, stop being a worthless drunkard. Okay? And she replies what? Yeah. Yeah. She says, I'm pouring out my soul from great distress. Great distress. She says, do not consider your maidservant a worthless woman. I have spoken out of great concern and provocation, poured out my soul before the Lord. And Eli says, go in peace, and may the Lord grant your petition that you've asked from him. So she gets up and leaves. And what does Hannah think after Eli has spoken to her? What's she think now? She's no longer distressed, no longer concerned over this, because she has faith. She has faith. Now, how can we apply that to us? How can we apply that to us? Yeah.
We take it to the Lord, we have to leave it there. You can't come out of this prayer with the same anxiety and stress that you had prior to going to it. You have to leave it there.
That's exactly what the Bible tells us. That's exactly right. It says if we have anxiety and we have distress, take it to God, and the God of all, who He will give us peace. He will give us peace.
It reminds me of David when he lost his child, and he got up, got dressed, bathed, and sat down and ate, and his servants couldn't figure out why he wasn't crying and weeping anymore. And it's because he understood that his hope lay in God, that he would see that child again.
Right. Very, very good. Thank you. Okay. Move on here.
So Hannah, she got up, they worshiped, and went home, and Hannah conceived, and she gave birth to a son, and she named him what? Samuel. She said, I asked of the Lord. Okay, and she named him Samuel. Okay, now, when did Hannah then go up to worship again with Elkanah? When did she go up? Yeah, she said, I'm not going to go up to worship until I'm ready to give him to the Lord for service. Okay. She said, we're going to wait. I'm going to wait until that time. Okay. So she said, till then, I'm going to keep him with me. Okay. So, what did Hannah bring as an offering? What did she bring as an offering? Okay. Look at Numbers 15 and verse 9. Numbers 15, verse 9. Numbers 15, verse 9. Says, this is actually, I think it's verse 8. When you shall prepare a bull for a burnt offering, for a sacrifice, to fulfill a special vow for a peace offering to the Lord. That's what she was doing. She was fulfilling the vow that she had made. So she knew what she was doing. She made a vow to the Lord, and she was fulfilling the vow, so she had to come before the Lord with an offering.
Yeah, it's also important recognize right before that what Elkanah says, do what seems right to you, because again, under the law with vows, as her husband, he could have annulled that vow. She made it without his knowledge and involved his child. So when he first found out about it, like we studied, he could have chosen to annul that vow, but he chose not to. He allowed it to.
That's correct. In the law, it says that if, the wife made a vow, the husband could say no. She made a rash vow, a foolish vow, and the husband couldn't say no. But he allowed it. And it was his son. So he could say, no, I'm not allowing this. But he allowed it. He said, may the Lord fulfill your vow. So he said, you can do this. He allowed it. That's very, very good thing. So they go up. She brings an offering to fulfill her vow, as the law said.
And she goes up, brings the offering, brings the child when he's weaned, and brings the offering. They came and made the offering and brought the boy to Eli. And what does she say to Eli when she brings Samuel to the Lord? Yeah, Cindy?
If she presents the knowledge that she was the woman that was standing there praying for the child, and that this is the child she prayed for, and the Lord had granted her her position, so she is giving him to the Lord.
Yeah, she says, I'm the woman who stood here praying before the Lord. For this boy I prayed. The Lord has given me the petition I asked. And how was Samuel dedicated to the Lord? What did she say? She says, I have also dedicated him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he's dedicated to the Lord, and they worshiped here. So that meant that he was a Nazarite. Okay? And we talked about this before in other lessons. How many in the Bible does it say were Nazarites? How many men in the Bible? Which ones were they? Samson, Samuel, and John the Baptist. There's the three men mentioned in the Bible who were Nazarites from their birth. So here's the second one now. Samuel is a Nazarite. Okay. So, how was God then working through Hannah? Go ahead. It's a different translation. It's just a different translation. Yeah, that's a good reason. I'll make this use this as an explanation. Whatever. That's a good reason to have different translations. What translation do you have? I can't see that. ESV. Okay. It's a good reason to have different translations so that you can see how different translations translate words. If you have one translation and another, you can look at different translations and see what how the different words are translated. Good point. Okay. So, how was God working through Hannah? Right? Here we have Samuel being brought to the people. He's going to be a faithful judge through Hannah. So, Hannah had some trials to go through. She gives her son to the Lord, but there's a greater thing happening here times. Trials we go through, there's a big reward that we don't see sometimes in our lives. Hannah had faith, and some great thing is going to happen here.
I remember this is still the time of the judges, so there's a lot of turmoil. There's not a lot of faith. There's not a lot of obedience to God in Israel. Even then, it's going to be demonstrated by Eli himself, and so Hannah is a shining light, and because of that, because of her faith from Samuel, he's going to make a big change.
Big change for the whole nation. He's gonna bring about a king that will unify the entire nation, okay, and bring about a huge change, but not without a lot of turmoil coming first. Sometimes that has to happen, okay. Sometimes it has to happen in our lives. Sometimes we have to go through a lot of trials to get to something good. Okay. So why was Hannah rejoicing in the we get to Hannah's prayer in chapter 2. Why was Hannah rejoicing in the Lord? In her song of praise, in the first part, Hannah prayed, "My heart exalts in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth speaks boldly against my enemies." Why is she rejoicing? Peninnah. She's not considered the barren one, which is a terrible thing in that day and age. Okay, she's been given a great status as a mother in Israel. Okay, so she can't be teased anymore. Okay, all right. So she's rejoicing in the Lord. The Lord. So how had the Lord vindicated Hannah? Nick. Yeah, the Lord had blessed her. Okay, how does the Lord take care of the needy and the afflicted, as it's mentioned here in Hannah's song of praise? It says the Lord, the Holy One. There's no rock like the Lord. It says the feeble gird on strength. Those who are full hire themselves out for bread. The hungry cease to hunger. The barren gives birth to 7. Well, how can she say that? How does the Lord take care of the needy and the afflicted? Exactly. It's not the strong that triumph, but who triumphs? The battle belongs to the Lord. It's a huge thing, isn't it? Yeah, Nick.
We're also brought about tests in our lives. So she still had a choice to make whether or not she would go into prayer and ask him for what she wanted, or just fight him the rest of her life and was miserable. She had to make the choice of what she's going to do, and her choice favored faith, and that's what's all about her faith. The trial, what the Lord did, faith, is her faith.
Okay. How will the Lord judge? How will the Lord judge the wicked? It says the Lord's going to judge the wicked. How's that going to happen? Yeah, Cindy?
It says here, he will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail, the adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in the heavens. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed.
Okay, that brings us to the last one. Who's the coming king and God's anointed? Talks about that at the end of the praise, the song of praise. Who's it talking about here? Talking about David and Jesus. Talking about them both. Okay, very good. All right. So, when we go on here, it goes on to the next part. It talks about Eli and his sons. How does it describe Eli's sons? Now remember, they're priests. They're in the lineage of Aaron. Okay? How does it talk about these priests? Worthless men. Wicked men. Okay? They're not good guys.
The literal one is when his sons of Goliath, which is false out of Satan. So that's how that is.
Hey, they're bad guys. They're not good guys at all. What were they doing at the tabernacle when the people brought their sacrifices to the Lord? They brought their sacrifices. How were they treating these priests? How were they treating the sacrifices? Okay? They weren't doing what they're supposed to do. Okay? So they brought their sacrifices. The sacrifices you're supposed to take and do it the right way. You're supposed to take the sacrifices like take a peace offering and give certain part to the priests, certain part goes to the people who brought it, and certain part gets burned, right? But what were they doing? What were these guys doing? Okay, yeah. They had a good setup here. They had like a pot, okay, that they would boil the meat, and these priests were coming by and doing what? He said, we'll come by and take whatever we want. But what else were they doing? It said they were doing something else that was not right. And yeah, that was not right. You can't go and take whatever you want, the priest said. The priests can't take whatever they want. The priests were only supposed to take what? Of the peace offering. Only a certain part. Okay, well, it says the correct way for the priest to offer sacrifices in Leviticus chapter 3, verse 5, and chapter 7, 29 through 29 through 34. When they brought the peace offering, the priests were supposed to get the breast and the thigh. That's all of the offerings. Okay? And what about the fat of the offering? What was supposed to happen to that? It's all get burned. But what were these guys doing? They're saying, we can take whatever we want. We'll take the fat for ourselves. And what would the people say? The people who brought the offering says, the fat has to be burned as a burnt offering. And the priest said, no, we'll take it. We want it for ourselves. What does that do? What does that say to God? Yes. They treated God's sacrifice with contempt. They weren't following the rules of the offering. In Leviticus, the book that outlines the rules for the offerings and the priest, says you have to do it this way. God says, when you come to me to treat me as holy. And they weren't doing that. They were treating God with contempt. When they did that, they despised God's offering. Okay? So, what was the sin of Hophni and Phinehas? In chapter 2, verse 17, says, thus the sin of the young men was great before the Lord, for the men despised the offering of the Lord. They despised the offering of the Lord. So then it goes back and talks about how the Lord blessed Hannah and Samuel. So it says, what did Hannah do every year when they came up for the to worship? They came up and came up to bring them new clothes, a new robe. It says that they were blessed. The Lord blessed them. And how did the Lord bless Hannah specifically? Yeah, Nick. Yeah. She had 3 sons and 2 daughters. Okay. So that's, yeah. That's right. Her firstborn. Okay. So now going on with the story, what other evil besides what we already talked about, what other evil were Eli's sons doing? Eli heard that they were doing what? Cindy. Right. So there were women that were helping with the work of the tabernacle, and they were having fornication with these women. The priests were doing that. So Eli comes to them and says, what is it that you are doing? What is this evil I've heard that you are doing? Okay. And Eli says to them, what happened? When the priest, when you're doing is corrupt, how can a man come to God? How can a man come to God if the priests are corrupt? That's what he says. He says, my sons, what is the report I hear? If one man sins against another, God will mediate for him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? So what happens when the priests are corrupt? That's how bad it is. Eli says it's really bad if you guys are corrupt. What, can a Christian help another if there's a problem? In Matthew chapter 7 and verse 3 through 5, Jesus says, if you have bad problems, sin in your life, can you go to someone else and say, hey, you got a little problem, let me help you? That's the quote where Jesus says, you got a beam stuck in your eye, can you go to the other guy and say, you got a little speck in your eye? No. So can these priests who are so corrupt help? Do anything good? That's what Eli's saying. No. How and then it talks about how Samuel's doing. How was Samuel doing?
To grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and also with man.
Right.
Similar to the way Jesus was too when he was in the temple, he said something.
Right. Very good. But the point that they're making here is, did Eli correct his sons?
No.
Eli let it go. His sons, the priests, are very wicked, and Eli did nothing. But then God sends what they call a man of God to Eli. And what did the man of God say to Eli? The man of God comes and has something to say. What's he say? Nick? That's exactly right. That's exactly what Eli was doing. He was honoring his sons more than God because he didn't correct his sons. He says, God was honoring Eli with the priesthood, honoring his family, and then God says, I honored you. I've given you great honor. What have you done? You kick at my sacrifice, my offering. You honor your sons above me. Therefore, I'm going to cut off all the male offspring in your house. This is a sign. Both your sons will die at one day. And now I'm going to raise up a faithful priest. Who is the faithful priest that he'll raise up? Samuel is the immediate context. But in the long-term context, it will be Jesus is the faithful priest. It says so
in Hebrews chapter 7, 26 through 28. In the immediate context, it will be Samuel, but the long term is talking about Jesus.
That makes it sound like Eli was eating all this food that they were bringing, and he was getting fat off of that.
He was. Because the priests are supposed to get their food from the offerings that the people bring. And that's what God's telling you. You're the one eating from the offering, but you're supposed to do it to honor me. But you're not honoring me because you're putting your sons above me. And God's always said, those who come near to me must honor me. We're to do that too. When we come near to God, we're to honor God. We're to glorify God. But in the long term, Jesus is the faithful priest. Jesus is our faithful high priest. That's who the prophecy is actually talking about. In the short-term context, it was Samuel. But in the long term, it's Jesus. Thank you all for a good question.